Welcome to Disambiguation. I'm your host, Michael Fauscette. Each week, we interview experts in artificial intelligence, generative AI, and business automation to help business leaders understand how to use these tools for the biggest business impact. Welcome to the part two of the live Salesforce special edition from Salesforce TDX 2025. Hopefully you caught last week's episode, some really interesting conversations about AgentForce and about TDX and the announcements, and then also a really cool demo of using AgentForce to drive a field service robot. So if you haven't checked that out, that should be in your feed, part one. And today we're going to talk to Kushwant Singh, SVP of Product Management. Well, I should say at TDX, I talked with him. It's not today. As you can see, I'm in my studio. So anyway, with that, let's check out this episode. Our show today is the second special edition from Salesforce TDX. We're going to do a deep dive into Salesforce agentic architecture and developing agents with AgentForce plus composable apps. And I'm joined by Kushwant Singh, SVP of Product Management. So Kush, welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, lots of fun stuff here. It's pretty exciting. Huh?
Oh yeah, TDX is our developer and admin conference, and so it's always fun.
Yeah, it was interesting. I had developed an agent on my own yesterday. Oh yeah, so that was fun. Yeah.
Is this your? Yeah. How many times have you been to TDX?
I think twice. I usually go to almost all the others, okay. But for a while I didn't. I was more focused on CX.
I see.
And now because of AI, I've gotten a lot more involved in down the stack a bit more. So yeah, so it's fun. So just to get us started, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do at Salesforce?
Of course. I've been at Salesforce for, I think, coming to 10 years in May. And my team and I were responsible for the application development platform at Salesforce. And so if you think about anything pro code, low code to create an app, anything pertaining to delivering the app at high performance, high scale, and then finally anything pertaining to accessing the application from a authentication and authorization point of view. That's what we work on.
Sounds good. So why don't you give us a little bit of an overview on what Salesforce means by agentic AI? I know the term is still developing a little bit, I think, in the general population. So maybe just help us a little bit there and then talk about how that fits into the AI strategy overall.
That makes sense. I think at the highest level, when Salesforce refers to agentic AI, it's really referring to what we call as digital labor, right? Digital labor that is I think it's capable of reasoning, it's capable of learning, it's capable of taking action, and it's capable of freeing organizations from repetitive tasks that need to happen at scale. But each one of those engagements, the repetitive engagements, needs to be highly personalized, right? And so that's really what we mean by when we say agentic AI.
Okay. That makes sense. And so really, agency is the key to the word, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense. So how does AgentForce differentiate itself, from the kind of traditional definitions of AI that we've had in software for a while?
Well, I think it starts to. So when you think about the differentiation, the traditional form of AI tends to be very much focused on known knowns, like you're training it constantly, right? It's right. Versus it being dynamically learning, dynamically be able to ground itself on all of the knowledge that it's aware of, and at the same time respond in a very personalized fashion. I think as you think about some of the differentiators that Salesforce's approach to agentic AI, it boils down to about, I think, 3 to 4 key tenets. The first one really has to sort of falls down with trust and governance, right? So how do we ensure that all engagements are grounded in relevant information? How do we ensure that there is no toxicity involved, there is no bias involved, there's no personal information that's being left behind.
Sure.
Right. So trust and governance, I think, is really important. And I think that's a key differentiator. Another one I would also like to highlight is a unified view of the metadata and data, right? Because again, the AI is only as smart as what it can
As the data goes
exactly,
on, yeah.
right? So whether the data is within Salesforce, outside of Salesforce, allowing these agents that you use, agentic AI that you use Salesforce to enable to sort of work on that data that's unified in the data.
Yeah.
That's another key aspect.
Sure. And that makes sense. So when businesses are looking at this, and then I know, I've talked to several customers over the last few months. I was in New York at World Tour. And so I've talked to a few, but I know you finally now, it seems like there's a wave, more and more companies are adopting.
Yeah.
So what should companies be aware of? What should they think about when they're thinking about, adding agentic AI to their workflow?
I think two things we've heard from our customers. One is, where do we start? Right. We've got a certain way of doing things. There's certain business workflows that we have.
Sure.
Where do we start? And again, I think, like, for example, you look at some of the customers that we have out there. We've got AAA in Washington, right? I love that use case in particular because they have a metric. I believe the metric that they use is keeping members informed, right? So KMI.
Yeah.
Imagine your cars, you've got a broken down vehicle in the middle of nowhere, call AAA and you want to be able to ensure that you're well informed.
And that they're responding.
Exactly. Yeah. Now imagine that happening, and that, you can imagine that happening at massive scale, right? Hundreds and thousands of customers.
Sure.
It's to a certain degree repetitive. But at the same time, to each one of those affected parties, it can be very disconcerting, worrisome, right? Like it has
to. Right. I'm worried about me. Exactly. I'm worried about the fact that I'm trended.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. So it has to be immensely personalized. And so that's why it goes back to, are there tasks looking at, where do I start? So looking at your business workflows, looking at tasks which are repetitive, tasks which need to happen at scale, tasks that needs to be highly personalized. Those are the business workflows where getting started with agents over there, I think, is really good.
Oh, that's interesting because I know when it started, almost all the use cases, I think all the use cases were Service Cloud at first, right? But then I've seen, here that we definitely, and obviously you guys are rolling out a new version and there's a lot of advancement there. But now the use cases are pretty broad across all of the different functions.
Exactly, especially with the recent announcement of, the agent API, which enables headless agents, right? So these agents can, they may be completely in the background. They may be part of a business workflow where you're mixing deterministic and non-deterministic sort of processes and engagements together, right? We have customers, so we have a customer, Smartsheet, right? And within, they're using the agent within the application itself. So for example, and Smartsheet, they do things like, for example, project management, work management, and I believe they had one use case where certain formulas are created by the user. You can have the agent proactively assist you in correcting those formulas, etc. Right. So again, service is definitely a good entry point.
Yeah.
Right.
Because it's really obvious that's But the others, I mean, like I was talking yesterday about using an SDR type agent to really help in that, go to market flow.
Exactly.
Unqualified lead to qualified lead, and then hand off to the human.
Exactly. So, in fact, Saks, for example, Saks uses us in a manner that is like almost like a personal concierge.
I've actually seen their demo, and that is really interesting because I think the inside of that interaction, the context that the agent brought to this, even down to location, identity, and understanding that the customer wanted something, and they could get it at this local store that's only a few blocks away or whatever, right?
Exactly.
Amazing.
And the use cases actually extend even further. So again, my team and I were responsible for application development, and so you've seen how these agents are helpful from a pro code point of view. But imagine engaging with an agent that helps you build an application altogether and sort of handholds you through the entire process as well. And so, again, that's the use cases are pretty endless.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, and I haven't really explored that much. Although I was working on some research around no code, low code recently, and that sort of comes into play when you think about how do you democratize this development in a way that anybody could do it. If I had an agent that could execute certain programming tasks that I don't know how to do, but I know what I want. That's really empowering.
Yeah, it is. I mean, like my son, he's a high schooler. He and he's working on a humanoid robot, and we're just telling the AI that, look, these are the number of servos, these are the number of joints. Write us a piece of code that helps the humanoid walk.
Yeah.
Right. And then you just iterate from there.
Yeah.
It's impossible before. So.
Well, and I mean, just in my little simple exercise yesterday, we were using, conversational interaction with AgentForce to get the agent built.
Right.
And it was interactive. It was asking, what use cases? Oh, this use case, do you want this to happen?
Yes.
What are the triggers to make me, escalate or whatever? Right. And so it was an interactive discussion that I didn't actually need to know what I didn't know because it knew.
It knew.
And then I could just fill in once I understood.
That's right. So possibilities are quite endless.
Yeah, it's really, it is exciting. So, well, we talked about a couple of good examples. So maybe we could talk a little bit about how the agents interact with the humans inside a company, and particularly if you want to tie it to some of the use cases you've seen already. I think that's interesting because obviously we know right now, at least, human AI collaboration is going to be for foreseeable future anyway, the way that we're deploying these, right?
Of course. In fact, so, clearly we've seen use cases where, in the service side of things, where an agent, it's almost dealing with tier 1, tier 2 type of engagements before handing it over into a human. Now, similarly, even with headless agents, we've now introduced an action that you can add to a flow, which says that, look, after an agent finishes something, right? This is an element that you can add into your flow that says, like, reach out to a human. And this step requires a human to take a look before going any further. So that's to a certain degree also another form of governance. Is that, look, as you mix deterministic and non-deterministic processes together, at times you want, yes, the non-deterministic process can help accelerate the work, but at some point it's important to also have a human take a look at what went down. Right. So,
or maybe even like some conditional statements that say, if this, for example, in the SDR case, if I'm interacting with a prospect and the prospect says, I have an urgent problem, or we just got the budget approved, certain things that would mean, we need now to escalate this to a human to build that relationship.
That's correct. Right. So
that's cool.
This human in the loop is going to be key.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And you mentioned trust before. Obviously, through the whole conversation that I've had over the last few years with Salesforce about AI, it always starts with that piece of the conversation. Right?
It always starts with trust, right? Grounding the information, grounding any interactions with the right information, ensuring that whether you are using your own LLM, whether you're using one of the LLMs that we offer, nothing gets left behind. Ensuring that toxicity is addressed, bias is addressed, and ensuring that you have the right sort of, this is your role as an agent, and you do not go beyond this.
It's interesting you say digital workforce. I like that term a lot, and in fact, I know there are some other vendors that have released workforce management kind of platforms for that and all. So how? Is that the way you think companies should think about it? Think about this as my digital workforce, and I'm building this into these functions in that way. Is that the best way to look at it?
I think that could be the inevitable, right? In fact, if you go to our site, help.salesforce.com, you'll see over there at the bottom, which says how many cases or issues have been resolved by agents,
Right.
and how many by humans.
Yeah.
Right. I think the coexistence is naturally going to arise.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that's one of the things that I think companies probably will have to think through in some detail. How do I manage
That's right. Observability becomes a huge piece.
Yeah.
Right. Are these agents doing what they're supposed to do? In a trustworthy, ethical manner. Right. So observability is going to be a huge piece.
Sure. So how do I make sure that I don't leak any data that I don't want out? Because I mean, obviously, there's a language model involved in this. Then you've got the issue that it trains itself on anything you feed it. Right. That's just its nature.
Yep.
So how does Salesforce set this up so that the agent has access to the context they need and my internal data that they need?
Yes.
But that doesn't leak out and get me in trouble.
Yeah. And so that's where the Salesforce has a very robust sharing and permissioning model, right? That still exists, and that still sort of is enforced, right? So that even an engagement, whether engagement is engaged, whether when an agent is engaging with you or engaging with me, you get to see only things that you should be seeing, right? Whether there's an agent or involved or not.
Yeah, so it's role-based, identity-based, and individualized.
Exactly. Right. So the whole concept of all things pertaining to OS N, all things pertaining to OS Z still are good.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Well, so how can you just talk us through really simply? If I'm a customer, I'm just thinking about doing this.
Yeah,
what's involved in creating an agent and deploying it in? Let's just say an easy one is customer service.
Sure. So I would say, look, if you're someone who just wants to kick the tires and get started, well, we announced the developer edition for AgentForce and Data Cloud. So anyone today, you can just sort of, for free, right, get an org and start experimenting, right? The agent builder has come a long way in sort of simplifying the process, where it asks you a series of questions, right? What's the goal that you're trying to achieve? Let's say, for example, you want to put it in your customer service site. Great. Are there a set of, knowledge base articles or PDF sheets that you want to just upload so you can start to ground the customer service agent, etc. Right. And that's it sort of helps you sort of walk you through the process of creating that agent, and then you get to test it. Right. You get to test it internally, right, within the agent builder itself, before then choosing to deploy it either in a customer service site that you already have, right, or one that you create using Salesforce.
Okay. And I saw that yesterday in just interacting with it, so it was pretty straightforward.
Right.
But now let's say I have something that's much more complex.
Yeah.
How does AgentForce support that professional developer that you need to bring in to solve, a more complex kind of set of actions?
Yeah. So the complexity arises at every different level, right? So for example, if you start off with, in a complex setting, clearly you have multiple data sources, right? What was old is now new, right?
Right.
You've got all of this information in different repositories. And so that's where Data Cloud comes into play, right? The zero copy ability to sort of bring your data together and ground it with the right data. Second level of complexity is APIs, right? Clearly, I may have a set of APIs that are outside of Salesforce's system.
Right.
And those APIs, like for example, a return API or a get order API. And I want to be able to, I don't want to reinvent that. I want to be able to reuse that.
Right.
And that's where, for example, MuleSoft for AgentForce, right, comes into play, where you can create topics and actions for your agent via that.
Yeah.
So you're really using your APIs. Now, when it comes to professional developers, no code is great, but they want all of the pro code capabilities, right? They want the CLI, the VS Code integrations, etc. And all of that's also available, right? So again, I think as you, what we've done is we've really brought the whole power of the platform to sort of really lifting agents.
I mean, it does seem like that it's been simplified in a lot of ways so that I had to think a little bit to come up with a complex idea that wouldn't be easily done, right? But the points you make, I think, are interesting. Integration is always an important piece, and when you're inside Salesforce, that's easy.
Yeah.
But if you're, in Oracle, ERP,
like many of our customers in sales,
I need to, So that adds complexity, and then the other one is making sure that I understand where the data is coming from and how it gets to that.
Exactly. And then at the same time, look at the number of our financial customers. They have very specific large language models that they want to be able to use as well.
Right.
And so the ability to build your own large language model as well.
Yep.
So again, I think once you go from, look, I want to kick the tires, whether you want to kick the tires or whether you want to go somewhere really complex.
Right.
We've done our very best to provide, something for anyone in that spectrum.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's an exciting opportunity, I think, for companies to interact with this. But I mentioned composable before, and I know that's something that you guys have talked a bit about here.
Yeah.
That now that you're seeing the AgentForce platform, and you're also interacting with your composable application.
Right.
So, can you tell me a little bit about that, and what does that do for customers?
Yeah, I'll give you. I'm going to give you I can clearly answer that question in a number of ways, but let me answer that question from the perspective of application development.
Okay.
So when you build an application today, it's got a data model. It's got a set of it could have a set of agents behind it. It could have a schema behind it. It could have a set of permissions behind it. Clearly, it could have some UI behind it. Right. And the list goes on, right? In terms of the pieces that make up an application. And being able to break these down in a composable fashion so that you can converse with an agent to say, look, I need to build a recruiting application. I need obviously a view for my employees, but I clearly need a view for the job seekers.
Right.
I need it available on the desktop, and I need it available on mobile. Right. Now, taking that utterance, breaking that down into a set of requirements, which then you refine with the customer, which then converts into an execution plan, which the LLM then goes off and starts to work with, for each one of those items I articulated, having what we call subject matter experts or little agents, right, behind the scenes that know their domain really well.
Yeah.
And they're talking to each other. They're conversing with the LLM and saying, this is what I know about my domain.
Right.
And as you think about a recruiting app, this is potentially what you need. Like, we already have object X, object Y. Maybe you don't need to recreate it, just reuse it.
Right.
So again, I think composability is going to be key to be successful in this agentic era.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's almost like we're starting to see kind of all the pieces come together in a way that enables people to do this in a simpler way. Even then, when I saw it 6 months ago, things were much more limited.
Yep.
And now it seems like it's gotten much broader, and it's much more integrated into all the different.
I mean, the pace at which things are moving is pretty tremendous.
Yeah, I mean, that is amazing. So you mentioned APIs. I mean, what role do APIs play in this as far as building an agent and getting an agent to do, what you want?
Yeah.
How do you guys think about that?
APIs is where you have got your business logic. And that's the backbone behind the actions, right? So if you want your agent to do something, it's got to be backed by an action.
Yeah, makes sense.
It's got to be backed by some logic which you see in your APIs. And you've already got APIs. And so why not reuse them?
Yeah.
And so exposing these, having the ability to expose these APIs, whether they're inside of Salesforce or outside of Salesforce, so that they can be used as agent actions. That's a key thing that the Salesforce platform enables.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's almost like this is your bridge to being able to use the agents across your whole business, and not just limited to customer service or sales or whatever, right?
Exactly, right.
Yeah, and actually, well, even in customer service, I mean, there are definitely reasons why you'd want to be able to get to ERP data, for example, for transactions and that sort of thing.
Or
so
order management system, right? So
right.
Yeah,
I need status of this order, or I didn't get my order, or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, interesting. Well, so An interesting discussion. And let's just put our crystal ball out for just a minute, because I love this part of it. Where do you think this is going? I mean, how do you, let's say 3-5 years from now, where do you see this going for companies? What are we going to be able to do that we can't do today?
Well, I think it boils down to being able to do almost every task at scale, but in a personalized fashion. Right? We talked about it. We talk about it that, hey, look, you know what? We should have a personalized shopping experience. We should have a personalized customer service experience. We should have a personalized sales engagement experience. But doing it is so hard because it's hard to scale.
It is hard.
Right?
Yeah.
But what agents offers, what this agentic era offers, is the ability to do that at scale and have it personalized. Right?
Yeah.
And that applies to almost every facet. Right? Of business. I think that's where we're heading towards.
That's really interesting, because I'm for years I've talked about how much I hate the idea of personalization, the way we've applied it. Right? Because it's not personal at all. It's segment based, right?
Exactly.
You and I bought a similar camera, so we must do the same things with it or whatever. But that's not true, right? What I want is individualized service, not segment based personalization.
Exactly. And doing that at scale is really hard, right? And so this opens up lots of opportunities.
Yeah. I mean, you think about it in business too. It's not, the external use cases are really easy, but the internal ones could be really impactful.
Yes.
Even just, from an HR perspective, helping employees with their benefits or, with vacation or whatever, right? I mean, that's interesting. That's really interesting. So, before I let you go, because we're definitely going to run out of time soon, what I like to ask at the end of every interview is, could you recommend somebody, a thought leader or an author, or somebody that you think would be really beneficial to the audience to check out?
Wow, that's a
tough one. Huh?
That's a really tough one. But what I like to, there was a paper by Get Y Combinator, the state of agentic AI. There was a paper, just forget who published it. Was it Y Combinator or someone? But yeah, I mean, I think looking at, a number of these incubation boxes and, that are funding these startups from an AI point of view, understanding, for example, taking a look at which are the companies that got selected for that incubation program. It often gives you a sense of, where the puck is skating.
Sure.
Right? Not all of them obviously get through, but it gives you a sense. So I think, especially in the age of AI, where things are moving at a pace which are, it's hard to keep up.
It is hard to keep up.
Right? And so I think having a keen sense of where startups are heading and where investment dollars are going. It kind of gives you at least a sense of.
I think that's great advice, because I admit I do spend a fair bit of time looking at what startups are doing and what gets funded, what doesn't.
Exactly.
That sort of thing, because there are so many advances and it is moving so quickly. And you and I do this for a living, and I have a hard time keeping up, and I'm doing this every day. So
exactly.
Cool.
So,
well, Kush, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. It was nice to meet you, and a really interesting conversation.
No, likewise, I learned a lot as well.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
And that's it for part 2. Hopefully you enjoyed that. It certainly was an interesting conversation. So thanks again to the Salesforce folks for setting everything up last week. Was a lot of fun. So hopefully we'll see you next week. And that's the show for this week. Thank you all for joining us. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to the show. If you enjoy the show, please leave us a review to help others find us. For more research on AI and other software, check out arianresearch.com. If you're an expert in AI, generative AI, or business automation, either as a provider or an end user, email your information to disambiguation@arianresearch.com. Don't forget to join us next week. Disambiguation is an Arian Research production. I'm Michael Fauscette, and this is the Disambiguation Podcast.